get that out of the way. And if everyone is good, I will start up the session now. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, wherever you are, for this Kinglake virtual tasting session. We are joined tonight by Chantal Daniels from Kinglake and Stuart Whytcross from Voyager. So we thank you for them to join us. We're going to taste all stages effectively of the O'Grady stand, which is the main signature whiskey produced by Kinglake. We're going to taste it in its full finished form and 3 stages along the way, as well as some of the grains and malts that are involved in its progress, as well as hearing all about the distillery and what's going on down there. So if you're not already, can you please stay on mute until the end, and we'll have some questions at the end like normal. Feel free to comment, get engaged in the chat. We'll respond via that. But yeah, in the short term, I'll hand over to Chantal to tell us a bit about Kinglake and how it all came to be.
Cool. So hi guys. Chantal, so co-owner. So I guess how do we come about starting the distillery? Well, Sam and I have always been really passionate about all spirits, I guess. We've sort of owned a couple bars overseas, so we did a lot of hospitality work. I'm Australian, Sam's actually English, so when we came back we bought the property up in Kinglake, and it was really the water source that kind of made us decide on whiskey, even though that was probably our favourite spirit. But yeah, got the water tested against the minerals, and I thought, yep, this is perfect. So what we wanted to do was really create a whiskey that kind of took on the characteristics of where it's made. So we're really open about what goes in it. Stu will talk about the grains that we get from him, the yeast that we use, how we use it. We do open and long ferments. They're outside, so we get lots of the live pollens and yeasts and things that happen in Kinglake. So we like to think that, and the barrel's obviously aged outside in the bush, so we're in a very bushy area. So yeah, we just like to think that all those things make Kinglake whiskey a bit more unique in that sort of way, and sort of one of a kind. So just the 2 of us team, we do everything ourselves. Sam at the moment does most of the production, and I'm sort of doing the sales part, so cruising around shops and bars, trying to sell the lovely spirit as well as I can. And yeah, I guess we were really kind of, when we were setting up, we are off grid, so some things were a bit difficult, like pumps and things like that. So we run pretty much most of it on solar panels, but except for our big pot still, we're quite efficient in a way that we're quite big scale. So our pot still is 2,500 litres, so quite big for sort of a small team like us, but we use a steam boiler to heat that. One positive thing about that means we can really work the whiskey hard. So when we've got it in the pot still, so you've got 2,000 litres sort of sitting in there, we can get that boiling in about 40 minutes. So we can really, really work our whiskey. And so hopefully that kind of sort of using this still so hot can maybe get a bit more caramel flavors in the spirit, we think. But yeah, I guess our focus on what whiskey we love, we really enjoy ex-bourbon, so that's why our main line is ex-bourbon, which is the one that you've all got now, called O'Grady stand. We really wanted I guess a spirit that was, I guess, a bit like a Springbank, not that it tastes like a Springbank, but a real sort of oily mouthfeel. So we cut really, really deep. Some people call us that we cut like rum cuts when we're doing our distillation run. So yeah, we cut really deep to kind of get that. But then I guess we're maybe a bit like if you want to compare to Scottish whiskies, maybe a bit like a Highlander, because we use the ex-bourbon and there's kind of a predominant sort of ex-bourbon barrel sort of taste. You'll get that, but that's mainly because we use 50-litre barrels, and that was for 2 reasons. We didn't want to make any other spirits to sort of help with the cash flow. As most people know, it's you're setting the business up, and then you're making the whiskey, and then you've got to wait for it to age for a minimum of 2 years. Hopefully it's ready. And so you're just sort of pumping money out. Not much comes back in that sort of 3-4 years. So we decided on doing 50-litre barrels. So the whiskey that you've got are all in our 50-litre barrels. And then we also aimed to try and do a consistent line, so a little bit different than small distilleries that are kind of like us, where they'll do single barrel, single cask releases. We aimed for to try and have a consistent as sort of a handmade product can be line. So we'll get a few 50-litre barrels, put them together to sort of make a batch, and then bottle those. So yeah, and then I guess another thing to really sort of take in is, so this is what the bottle looks like, is maybe the colour. It's a very kind of colour for an ex-bourbon barrel. You sort of look at, if you're looking at the ones that have sort of aged for, you know, 10, 20 plus years, they tend to look a bit more like wee water. But yeah, I think that's just because of the 50-litre barrels being cut down. So it's American oak, sort of a bit more forgiving when you cut it down. So yeah, so I guess that gives a little bit of a info about the whiskey we're trying. So yeah, so if you want to try the first one, so yeah, this will be the O'Grady's, and it's the 46% ABV, and you should have all the details of, we always put all the info on the bottles about when it's been distilled and when it's bottled, so there's no you have full information.
So I will just jump in at this point and say that we are going to be trying the O'Grady's again at the end of the night. Yeah. So either, depending on how many glasses and what you've got in front of you, either pour half of it now and save half of it. There's a 30 ml bag compared to the 15 mils of the rest of them, or put it all in the glass and just make sure you save yourself some for the end so you can compare and see what you think after we've been through the rest of them. But yeah, just put it in the glass, let it get a little bit of air, and we'll start tasting that. In the chat, guys, feel free to comment anything, especially when you're tasting it and what you're getting from it, all those sort of things. Joshua was actually just asked, what does cutting down mean when you reference cutting down before?
Yep, so like the spirit run. So that's obviously the final part of making the whiskey, apart from when you're about to put in the barrel. So when the spirit's coming off the still, basically you can do cuts, and there's like sort of, you got heads, hearts and tails is what people tend to call. The heads is sort of the stuff that you don't want, well, definitely don't want. It's like acetone, it's just basically poison percent. So you sort of take that out, and you sort of, you can do it by ABV. A lot of people can do it. So you'll take off that top, and so what you really want is the hearts, and the hearts can vary for anyone really, for where they think is the best part of the spirit. So a lot of people will cut at 60% ABV, and then the rest will be the tails, where we'll cut down to 57% ABV. So that's kind of really low, but we like, there's two reasons. I guess one, we wanted, we thought the deeper we cut, the more complex the whiskey will taste, and you'll get a bit of that peated that we've got. It's not a peated whiskey, but there's a bit of peat malt in there. They say the lower you cut, the more you get that out. And yeah, so you've got more imperfections, but we like to think that that makes, yeah, just more complex, but the barrel has to work harder to sort of get that taste. So yeah, so the feet, yeah. So it's a bit hard to sort of explain the cuts probably any more than there's three parts, and everyone can vary between how big they make their parts and what they want to put into the barrel. So
sure. One thing I will say, guys, also, if it's your first time doing one of these tastings with these bags, just be careful. And you may have already found out, when you take the lid off, the little seal likes to sometimes come with it in the glass. So put a thumb on that when you're undoing it, and you can avoid that. So yeah, let's all have a smell, have a nose, have a taste, and let us know what you are getting from that. And maybe Chantal, tell us what you guys how you guys like to describe what you guys get from it in terms of nose and palate. And
so I guess a lot of people like talking about taste, and I guess one thing that I probably don't talk about a lot is the actual taste of the whiskey, because I find it very subjective. And I used to go, when you used to go to lots of tastings, you just find it really intimidating when people say, can you smell that autumn leaf? And I'm like, I don't know, can I? I don't know, am there something wrong with me? So I so I don't tend to go into too much, but I do sort of go through basically what we put in it. So we've got the 4 different grains that go into it, which Stu will go into in more detail. So we've got a bit of a cereal flavoring grain, bit of a biscuity, We put a chocolate roasted in there. So some people talk about they can get some jaffle flavor in there. And then we put a heavy peated. So we get the heaviest peated that we can get, and that's from the Scottish borders. But again, it's not a peated whiskey. It was just there to sort of try and add more complex flavors. And then I guess the other thing, using ex-bourbon barrels. Yeah, so you get that sort of vanilla. You can kind of get that sort of taste. So yeah, it's just sort of trying to blend all those together. And I guess with the yeast, I don't know if people know much about the types of yeast. We actually use a distiller's yeast, just because when we were setting up, we spent probably most of our time was the brewing part of making the whiskey was the most challenging. We tried all the different yeasts, like ale yeast, which are sort of more popular in Australia, but yeah, just didn't give, they call them the esters, just didn't give as much flavor or taste as what the distiller's yeast went or did. So we went to distillers, and then because we're located in the bush, we leave it for a week. So the distiller's yeast tends to do its thing by day 3, and then we leave it open for another 4 more days for all the live pollen and yeast that's around to sort of give its taste as well. So yeah, so I'm always interested to hear what people say. I've heard people can get eucalyptus out of it because the barrels are aged outside in the bush. But yeah, so yeah, that's how we sort of put it together. So you get that kind of real oily mouthfeel, the lovely grains sort of in there with the sort of, yeah, more current with the vanilla sort of ex-bourbon barrel influence.
Yeah, great. Leon's just asked in the comments, he said that Kinglake Distillery had an interesting start with the first batch potentially being bad, but then turned into something good. Could you describe that adventure a little, please?
Yeah. So after waiting so long, we're quite lucky because we cut so deep into our faints. We sort of thought even with a 50-litre barrel would have to wait 3 years. So we sort of calculated it. But the first lot of 50-litre barrels, it sort of come to 2 years, and we're like, oh, great, perfect. So we thought to sort of help with our cash flow, we'll do some pre-sales, which we know never to do again because you just don't know how long it's going to take. So we thought, oh yeah, it'll be ready. It was tasting good. So we went to do the flocking part, which no one sort of goes into too much detail, but it's a bit painful when you don't really know what you're doing. So, you're learning. So the flocking part is basically you have the cask strength, and that's basically what the whiskey is when it's ready, what's the alcohol percentage in the barrel. So it can be anything from, 55% to 65% ABV. So to knock that back, because we really like the whiskey at 46%, which is what you're tasting, we get some spring water from Kinglake. And so we mix that down. So pretty much you just add it and you cut it down to about 46% ABV. But what that does is, in the spirit, it stirs up a whole lot of, I think it's like amino acids, but it's a bit like Cooper's, the beer, you sort of get all that settlement in it. So you've got to wait for basically, but they're tiny, 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 tiny little particles. So you've got to wait it sit. Basically, the little particles have to join. So then they're heavy enough to actually fall to the bottom of the container. And you've got to wait for that to completely clear. Completely clear before you sort of siphon it off the barrel. So we're sort of checking it, putting the torch in, and it kept looking like the particles are on the top. We kept checking it. And, obviously we did some pre-sales in the November, and we're waiting, and it was 3 months in, I'm still checking at the top. And then I finally called Blackgate Distillery, Brian, he sort of was a bit of our mentor with helping us. I called him, and I'm like, what's going on? Like it was cold where we were doing it. It's in a cold environment. It's just still not flocking. And we had these pre-sales and know that people were waiting for like 3 months to get this barrel. And he goes, oh, no, sometimes it can just look like that at the top. So anyway, we're like, oh, so I checked it. It was fine. So we siphoned it all, put them into sort of barrels so we could just shift them. They're just these blue barrels that everyone uses. And we shifted them to the shed to start bottling, telling everyone, woo, okay, it's going to bottle, we're going to send it out. And then Sam turns around, he's tasting, and was like, oh, I think something's wrong. It's not just something's wrong. It's not tasting like how we thought it would taste. And then we thought, oh, don't tell me the blue barrels had contaminated it. And we sort of spent hours and hours and hours sort of thinking some barrels are worse than others. But actually it wasn't even worse. It was just the taste of our whiskey that was different, to just show you the difference in, even though we mixed it, the difference in different barrels, we guess. we don't actually know, because we've never, all our whiskies since that have never tasted the same. So, but we sent it off, some friends sent it off to Andrew Gospel, from Gospel, sorry, and some other people, and they're like, no, it's perfect, don't throw it away. But we thought we just lost, like, you know, $100,000 in one big batch, and it was our first batch. It was a bit of a yeah. We had our moment, but
well,
yeah,
I'm very glad it worked out well.
Yeah, we did. So then we quickly got the other one, and now we knew that it wouldn't take so long. We knew how to do the whole flocking process. But yeah, and then we released that as kind of like false start, which was technically the first one, but the second release. So yeah, that was a bit of the story. And then some people, we still have a few bottles of that, and some people, yeah, still prefer that one than the other. But yeah, it's a one-off.
What a happy accident.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I wasn't so happy at the time.
Yeah, collector's item. That's right,
Yeah.
Leon.
Yes.
Well, I hope you all are enjoying. I know I certainly am. This first sample of the O'Grady stand that we're going to drink tonight. And now let's start breaking it down and get to the first step in the chain that we're going to talk about, being the actual grain and malt. So we might invite Stu to come in and talk to us a bit about what's going on there. How are you going, Stu?
Yeah, good. Hey guys. Yeah, I'm Stu. I'm one of the co-founders and co-owners of Voyager Craft Malt. I'm also a grain grower. Have been growing grain for, I was just working out then when Chantal was talking, for the last 30 years. I was actually, for my 12th birthday, was given 50 acres by my mum and dad as a birthday present, rather than them pay me a wage to work on the farm during after school and school holidays and whatever else. You know, they basically said, look, you work for us, and here's 50 acres that you can borrow our equipment to farm it as you please. And that's in Western New South Wales. We've been farming there for 4 generations, growing cereal grains, predominantly malt grade barley. Yeah, look, basically, long story short, the farming, when I was given the 50 acres, it was right before the millennium drought, so basically 10 years of drought, which kind of was the stark reality into the difficulties of farming cereal grains in Australia. And yeah, basically knew that all I wanted to do was work on the farm, and during that period of time learned that the farm wasn't going to support me and my family. So I moved off the farm and went to university, where I studied engineering. Long story short, met a girl there that became my wife. She was studying winemaking, and in an attempt to try and impress her, I needed to learn a little bit about wine. I was drinking a lot of wine at the time at uni, but it was in these things called Goon Sunrises, which was cheap cask wine, orange juice, and red cordial. So I set on this mission to try and impress her and her family, who owned a winery. And during that, got right into beer and became obsessed with beer. Started traveling to all around the world, Germany and Belgium, and came back with this plan to start a craft brewery up in my hometown, and was going to use grain that we'd grown on our farm, and just discovered the big disconnect between cereal grains grown in Australia and beer and spirits. So basically, before we could start the brewery, we needed to start a malt house. So I put my engineering skills to use and built a small little vessel to make malt for this brewery that we had planned. And it was kind of just at the start of the craft beer, I guess you'd call it, revolution here in Australia. And we're basically bombarded with a lot of new breweries that were opening up. And I was still kind of school teaching at the time. So we're making 1 ton of malt a week, and we're selling that to a few craft breweries around the place. And I did engineering at university, but actually took a school teaching gig, teaching senior students in year 11, 12, metalwork and engineering. And I took a phone call from a guy over in the UK who was Chantal's partner, Sam, who said that she had this plan to come back and start a distillery and wanted to use our malt. And there wasn't anyone that hated whiskey more in the world than me, probably 6 years ago. And we used to get calls quite regularly from distillers ringing us up asking if we had distillers malt, and I kind of dismissed them all fairly quickly, just kind of saying, look, you guys are after the cheapest, kind of nastiest stuff. You're not going to get that from us. But what really kind of got my attention was that Sam was looking at chocolate malts and Vienna malts and smoked malts and trying to create what would have been a fantastic beer, but make spirit and make whiskey from that. And that really kind of got me quite intrigued in what they were trying to do. And it wasn't that long after that Chantal and Sam both came and visited us, and I thought, geez, these guys are fairly keen. They've come all the way up to our little farm out in Western Riverina, and and just have loved kind of working with them and seeing how it's progressed. And I think now probably in Australian whiskey there's no shortage of people that have got some fairly complex malt bills with chocolate malt and whatever else in it. But I think for us, Kinglake was certainly the first distillery that we had a genuine conversation with around malt and malt flavour and what they're looking for, and certainly the first whiskey that I tasted that contained our chocolate malt in it as well. So it's great to be here this evening and then seeing what Chantal and Sam have done with Kinglake and the products that they're creating from not only malt that we've made, but from grains that we've been able to grow as well.
That's fantastic. It's quite the journey from trying to impress a girl to lead you to all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I guess we've been fairly lucky in some regards. What's happened in terms of craft beer has been phenomenal, but you look at what's happening in terms of Australian whiskey as well. And I guess we differ. So Australia produces, I think it's about 9 million tonne of malt Australia produces every year. Our new malt house, we've just recently expanded, we'll produce about 10,000 tonne per annum. So we're still significantly small compared to the other larger maltsters in this country. But traditionally, what's happened with malt is that it's been a mass-produced. Most of the growers that grow grain, it all gets blended up in the silos. You drive out in the country and you see these town silos where all the grain gets blended up. Trains come through, pick it all up and further blend it, and then it's this one homogenized kind of product that's done down in the ports, either in Sydney or Melbourne, and a lot of it's exported. But what isn't is then trucked back to regional distilleries or breweries. So what we offer is a single origin. So every bit of malt that leaves our malt house has a QR code attached to it. So Chantal and Sam know the farmers, the GPS coordinates of the paddocks, the variety, and then so we're all really about. I guess without getting too deep into it, one of the frustrations I had with my wife being a winemaker and seeing the way that grapes were treated in that winemaking process, I got really jealous, but also frustrated that, just because we chose to grow a different agricultural product, we weren't growing grapes, our family had been growing malt grade barley for generations. We had no connection or no recognition for what we were growing. You ask people to when they drink wine, to picture a winery, they think of these rolling hills and vineyards, and when you ask them to, when they're drinking a beer or whiskey, to picture a distillery, it's an industrial factory, in the outskirts of the city area. They don't kind of think about grain and farmers and agriculture. So I guess that's kind of been a real passion of ours, and one of the catalysts for getting into malting in the first place, but also with our recent expansion, which has coincided with a tourism development called the Witten Malt House, where we've got 16 villas on site. Basically, it's our new malt houses in the middle, surrounded by all our peaks, and we've got a pretty impressive cellar door restaurant there where we're able to stock a lot of our clients' products. So a lot of beers and spirits, including the Kinglake whiskies in there, and basically, try and let consumers know that these products started in the ground in paddocks surrounding the malt house, but the farming process for a lot of these grains, farmers are working on paddocks. It's not just planting the grain and then harvesting it a year. A lot of these farmers are preparing soils sometimes 7 years in advance of planting the grain itself. So a lot of distillers will talk about whiskey being a long game. If you incorporate, purely just because of the barrel aging process, if you incorporate the planning that goes into preparing a paddock for growing malt grade barley, you can add an extra 7 years onto that whiskey aging process by the time that someone's got a bottle of spirit. So, the O'Grady stand whiskey that you guys are drinking tonight, I'm not sure how long that's been aged for. Chantal can probably allude to that, but you add an extra 7 years onto it. We had farmers that were getting the soils ready to put that grain in the ground before we even malted it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point of view about that timeline. And like you said, that point of origin and traceability, provenance of the product that then extends through with such a setup like a Kinglake, where everything is also contained and using that localized water, and everything, like Chantal said earlier, is aged out there in the bush in the small barrels. It's a great connection. What you are doing and how you're trying to do your malts is a point of difference through to what they're doing with their whiskies and whatnot. And it's it's pretty fantastic having been out there and seen their side of it at least. Should we have a smell, a taste, whatever you would recommend of some of these malts that people have got in front of them, and in which order would you recommend?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think probably I think everyone's got the Atlas there in front of them.
Yeah, everyone. Hopefully you've all got a bag of Atlas in there, guys. Open that one up.
So Atlas is this is actually done with a New World barley. So this would be if someone came to us and said, look, we want a distiller's malt. This is what it is. So it's basically a malt that processes really well. It's got a lot of extract, so a lot of sugar, and it's one that yields really well in the paddock and also in the brew house. So I guess for if you were going to make a beer from this malt, it would be a very clean, crisp lager is what this malt would make if you used it in a beer. So it's a great what we call a base malt. It's a great base to start a recipe from, because you can you can get a lot of alcohol in there. You can get a good structure to then start adding in other specialty malts to it to really build up from there. So I guess if someone came to us wanting a distiller's malt and wanted to use 100% distiller's malt, this would be the one that we'd be getting them. We have very few distillers that would use just this one malt, because it is on its own is kind of fairly, I don't want to use bland, but it's fairly I'm sure the word I'm looking for, but not offensive. It's just a very clean, crisp malt. The variety of this malt, it's done with a Latrobe barley, which is a very new, as I said before, New World, so a modern day barley. There's probably, I don't know, there'd probably be something like, they'd probably be close to 5,000 new barley varieties bred every year by a lot of big breeding companies. Of those, there's probably only one or two every kind of 3 years that actually make it through to full malt accreditation. So every, as a farmer, every probably three years, you're given a new, or if you want to sell malt grade barley, you're basically dictated the variety that you need to grow and that you need to plant. Because if you're growing an older variety, the bigger malts, because they're blending all these grains in, they don't really want to be blending different varieties, so they kind of dictate the variety that you got. So at the moment, it's got Latrobe barley in it. It'll move to a newer modern day variety once it's released in a couple of years. I think there's one at the moment called Beast that's just had accreditation, and like I said, they're varieties that process really well, great extract. yield really well in the paddock. A lot of the breeding has to do with drought resistance or drought tolerance and pest disease resistance. So a lot of benefits to farmers there in terms of yield and what they're paid for it and those kind of things. And as a maltster, it's a good malt to work with. And I guess as a distiller, it's a great malt to build a recipe around.
Sure. All right, what else have we got there that we got the Vienna and the chocolate? What
Yeah, so the Vienna's probably the next one. And probably just like, I'm not sure how many grains you got in that sample. They're probably, barley has a husk around the outside of it. So it's probably nothing that you want to, you probably don't want to be eating spoonfuls and spoonfuls of this. Probably a couple of grains is I probably should have mentioned that before everyone hoed into it. But the husk is quite fibrous. And from a processing point of view, it's one of the reasons why barley was used only in beer and in whiskey production, because that husk during the mashing process, as that grain is milled, the husk kind of still stays in contact, and it provides it like a filtering bed or a filtering agent. So things like rye and wheat don't have a husk on them. So rye and wheat are a lot more palatable to chew on and eat. You'll notice if you're chewing on that raw barley, on that malt, that after chewing on it, you'll get a little bit of sweetness from the grain, but you'll find that the husk kind of works its way around to some weird parts of your mouth, because your mouth just doesn't want to be swallowing it. And don't be afraid to spit it out. It can kind of get stuck down in your throat at times as well, and you'll be coughing for the rest of the night. So it's not it's great to chew on it, and I think do this little just see the different flavors in these different malts. So the next one that we're going to have a crack at is the Vienna Malt. Now this Vienna is done with an old variety called Schooner. So it's a variety that's really popular with craft brewers, and it's actually quite popular with distillers, but not necessarily from an efficiency point of view, more so from a flavor. So I think we deal with about 350 craft breweries around Australia, and craft breweries, that the beers that craft brewers make are full-bodied. They're normally a little bit higher in alcohol, a lot more hops and bitterness there. So they need a lot more residual sweetness in the beer to carry and balance out everything else that's going on. So Schooner is a variety that doesn't ferment out. It's these newer bred varieties of barley produce these malts that are highly efficient producers of alcohol. The older varieties, such as Schooner, aren't. So it'll produce a beer that leaves some residual sweetness. And if you're trying to get alcohol from it in a distillery, you're not going to be extracting every last bit of sugar that you can from it, because it just by its nature, it doesn't want to ferment out. So distillers normally take a 5% hit in losses by using this malt, but the flavour from it is far superior to any of the newer varieties. So, and traditionally a Vienna malt is one that's kilned a little darker. So very quickly, the malting process, once we've got grain harvested in the paddock, there's no sugar in that grain. For us to kind of release that or make that sugar accessible for the distillery, we malt it. And the malting process is fairly simple. We wet the grain, we trick it into growing, so it actually grows rootlets and a little shoot. And as it starts to grow, it actually modifies the starches inside that grain. And if you let the grain continue to grow, it actually uses up the sugar. So it kind of creates sugar and then it uses the sugar up as it grows. So we, as maltsters, our job is to let the grain grow, generate that sugar, and then right before it starts to use it, we basically kill the grain and stop it from growing. So we capture that sugar inside the grain. And the way we do that is by blowing hot air through the grain and getting rid of the moisture. And based on the temperature that we kiln the grain determines the flavour profile in it. So you think of an oven, and you're cooking biscuits, you crank that oven right up and cook it for a long time, they're going to come out with a lot more Maillard reaction and burnt biscuit kind of characters. I said before with the Atlas, it's one that would make a very clean, crisp kind of lager or pilsner. It's the lightest kilning profile that we do. So we hit it at basically 58 degrees Celsius for 24 hours, and then we slowly ramp that temperature up to about 80 degrees for 1 or 2 hours, and that's it. A Vienna malt is very similar process, but towards the end, once we're starting to what we call the cure, those temperatures raise up to about 90 degrees for up to 5 to 8 hours. So with that, as you then start to get some real biscuit-like characteristics in the malt. Vienna Lager is if everyone's had a Vienna Lager, that is a style of beer that is basically made with 100% Vienna malt, and it's kind of a very deep amber orange kind of hue to a beer. And that's essentially what these guys at Kinglake are adding in to really drive home some of those biscuit kind of characters in their spirit. So if you have a chew on a couple of grains of that, hopefully you'll pick that up. That it's got a little bit more of a toasted kind of character to it.
So Gerald's just jumped in and said that, funnily enough, the Vienna makes him think of his Austrian mother's yeast cake. Look,
I haven't had an Austrian yeast cake from Gerald's mother, but it sounds delicious. And look, I'm assuming that there's possibly malt in it. Funnily enough, everyone without even drinking whiskey today, I'd be fairly confident would have consumed malt. It's in most breakfast cereals. It's in most breads. It's in most chocolate bars. So there's possibly and look, Vienna malt was the style of malt that the Austrians made. That was just all their malts were like that. They just loved to kiln it a lot. I guess they weren't tight asses like some of the other countries when they were making their malt, and were more liberal with the heat they applied to it, and that was a style of malt that they produced there. So Gerald, there's possibly that malt in that cake.
I know that when you say about everyone's tasted malt before, like as soon as, especially the Vienna more than the Atlas, just chewing on the on it, then it's a flavor that instantly just your tongue knows it. Everyone knows that malt, whether it be from everything from distilled spirits, beers, even cakes like that, through to things like malt, as kids, sort of malted milkshakes or Maltesers even, there's that element that goes through, where there's a real familiarity to it. And that Vienna one, if husks aside, I could chew on that all day. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. And probably the other thing, if you're tasting it and you're going to, I kind of expect it to be sweeter than that. I've had malt extract before, and it's got a similar consistency or sweetness to honey. Getting sugar from barley is a two-step process. So the first step is us malting it, where we're basically taking these long chain starches and we're creating enzymes during the malting process. But basically, we're taking these long chain starches and cutting them into short chain starches. Then when it goes to the malt house, when it goes to the brewery, they mill it into a powder and they mix it with water around 65 degrees. And that's activates the enzymes that then convert those short chain starches into sugar. So it's kind of a two-step process. So what you're getting when you're chewing on that grain is that some of the heat from the saliva in your mouth is actually converting a little bit of that sugar in your mouth. So you're still not getting the full sweetness of it, but you're getting enough to get the flavor from with the protein and the starches that are in there.
Sure. Should we try the chocolate one, the last one, before moving on to the New Mex Spirit and seeing how they all start to affect things?
And probably before you throw the chocolate malt in your mouth, it's probably one you only want to start with, or probably start and finish just with a single kernel. It is a fairly intense malt, and probably one that resembles more like a coffee bean than malt. And we do this in a coffee roaster. So we take malt, our pale malt, which so we can take the Atlas that you tasted first, and basically throw it in a coffee roaster, where we hit it about 250 degrees for 2.5 hours, and we basically pull it out once it starts resembling that bitter chocolate, coffee bean kind of character. It's a beer, it's a malt that you don't need to use very much of to have a very big impact in flavour in whatever it is you're making. So for a stout, if you're going to make a stout beer, you could make it with 95% Atlas, the very first malt we had, which would make a clean, crisp lager, and 5% of that chocolate malt would be enough to turn the beer completely black and enough roasted kind of coffee flavour for you to know, well, wow, this is a stout that I'm drinking. So it's a malt that we don't sell a lot of to brewers or distillers, but it's one that probably has the biggest impact in any of the spirits and beers that, you know, when it's used in that. And probably before we get into it, one of the things that I really enjoy from the Kinglake whiskies is that most of the distilleries that have these fairly big, complex malt bills where they're throwing in particularly chocolate malt, are also aged in some fairly big casks as well, whether they're, you know, ex-fortifieds and whatever else. So one of the things I love about the Kinglake whiskey is that it's aged in ex-bourbon. I find that the chocolate character that I can pick up from the chocolate malt kind of plays off with the ex-bourbon barrel. I get this kind of vanilla chocolate milk kind of character in the background there that I just think is a it's probably one of the nicest representations of chocolate malt being used in a whiskey, because it's not bombarded with a lot of other heavy cask influence that's in there. It's actually, you know, comes across as quite what I find elegant with the playing off in the ex-bourbon there. So I think it's a great whiskey that we like to showcase chocolate malt in, because of how it interacts with the bourbon barrel.
It's certainly got that that bitterness, you know, and that you would associate with more things like coffee and whatnot. And for those of you who've got the bag that's labeled Voyager Mix, which is literally a mix of these that we've been speaking about, you'll be able to see in there and clearly identify the chocolate ones, and just the ratio, you know, like you said, the value you get for a small amount of that grain. You can see that reflected right there in that mix that is there, which is very, very interesting. So maybe if we bring Chantal back in, now that we've sort of had a bit of a talk and taste of those malts, should we move on to the new make spirit and see that first early step in the journey for a great extent?
So do they also have the peated malt there in front of them?
Oh, I apologize. We do have the peated malt. Sorry,
we want to. Yeah. So just a disclaimer: we don't do the peated malt. It's from Scotland. I believe Chantal. Yeah. So we don't do a peated malt at the moment, but we are working towards it. One of the things that has basically limited us to not doing a peated malt is that peat just doesn't exist anywhere local to us. We believe we've found a source in northern New South Wales, which we're exploring. So hopefully in the near future we'll have our own peated malt. But I said before that the malting process was around wetting the grain, germinating it, and then drying it out. Back in the day, the way they dried out malt was they'd light a fire, and they'd use the heat from that fire to dry the malt out, and the malt would take on the smoke as a byproduct of that heating process. So there would have been a point in time where any beer and whiskey you had a smoky character to it because it was a byproduct of the malting process. Fast forward to today, and we've got a lot of cleaner methods of heating malts or drying out malts, but the peated malts have stayed around just because of their familiarity with Scottish whiskey. So, you know, one of the key characteristics of peat is this real medicinal iodine kind of character from the smoke. We're currently doing native wood smoke, so red gum, stringy bark, iron bark, which we've got where we're actually imparting that smoke during the kilning process and having the malts take on that kind of smokiness. But yeah, be really nice for us moving forward to get the peated malt and have guys like Chantal and Sam use 100% our stuff rather than having to bring it in from Scotland.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great.
So chewing on that, you should instantly pick up. It's a heavily peated malt, so you shouldn't have any issues there picking up a smoky character when you're chewing on some of that malt.
For me, as soon as I opened the bag compared to the others, the nose of that, that smoky peat came through. So it's a really interesting comparison with the other three where for me, and I must admit my nose is not in the best shape at the moment, but that was the strongest thing I got from it. But yeah, equally quite delicious just to sit there and chew, and a completely different characteristic to all of the others. Yeah. Which is fantastic going into that blend, which then now is a better segue to get back to the new make spirit. So if you haven't got the new make spirit out yet, can you just open up that bag, get it in the glass, and let it air, and have a nose. Obviously you're expecting to smell different things than what we've smelt before. You can see, for those of you who aren't familiar with the new make spirits, you can see it's clear. There's been no obviously coloration or anything from the barrel, from the wood, from the ex-bourbon stuff. So I mean, Chantal, I'll hand back over to you for what you guys what you talk about and think about with it at this stage. And what percentage is it? It was on the bag, 63.5 for this one.
So it's going to be a little bit stronger than this is a bit stronger, so be a bit careful. But yeah, you can just, what's a good way is probably, I guess, smell the new make and then smell the glass from the O'Grady stand. You can really sort of smell lots of differences. Yeah, grappa. All new make has that kind of has that sort of smell. I don't think wherever it makes it, you've got that. Some people really enjoy the taste of just the new make on its own, but it's got to be. And you can sort of get that hotness. So a lot of people talk about a whiskey being hot, and that's basically it's not, if you're tasting it in the barrel, which will be interesting when you taste the next one, because that's sort of about halfway through most of our maturations. You should still maybe get that taste of the different that hotness from the new make compared to sort of the barrel starting to work. So that's why we thought it would always be good to sort of have the end product, then we'll talk about the grains, you get an understanding of the grains, and then try the new make when it's come off. So we put it in our barrels at normal barrel strength, so 63.5%. That's just what Scotland did, so that's kind of what we did as well, but that's what we do. So open to thoughts on what people think. I would say probably majority of people aren't big fans of the sort of the clear new make product.
It's there's obviously substantially different to the end product and to whiskies in general, but it has when you use that word, a hot whiskey, right? Or hot spirit, it really does have that warming sensation right down the throat. You feel it the whole way, similar to I'm exactly on board with Gerald talking about grappa. My godparents are Sicilian, and they make this rocket fuel that Christmas makes you get up and about. But it's that stuff's not got any this is harsh to say, their stuff doesn't have any redeeming features at all, whereas this one, you still are getting that sense of what we've been speaking about. There's a sweetness there, and apart from that warmth, it's obviously just very young. Leon's just said you'd think it'd be much more pain, but it seems to have a different smell flavor to the post barrel. So so there's I don't know if there's much more to say about the new make.
No, not really.
It's pretty much fresh out of the still and about to be put in a barrel.
Yes, correct.
So if people want to, I don't know if people are operating with multiple glasses, preferably. If not, if you've just got the one, you can either drain it one way or another. And the next one will be the work in progress, which Chantal just said is about halfway through its maturity. So take a minute if you need to, and get that one in your next available glass, or however you'd like to do it, and we'll see what differences we can detect in that rough ballpark. How long to this? How long to the work in progress, you reckon?
Yeah, so it's about a year, just over a year. So it was probably just under. So the stuff, the O'Grady stand that we're drinking tonight is actually closer to 3 years old rather than 2. Just who knows why? Some ages quicker than others. Like our first lot of 50-litre barrels was done by 2 years. We wouldn't want to leave it any longer, but this took a little bit longer, to sort of get to how we would be happy with. Yeah, so the work in progress will be just about a year old, so just under half of what its maturation would be normally. So yeah,
and
see if
we're seeing that this is effectively the same, declared at 62%. So obviously you would not expect it to have changed significantly by being in the barrel, but what you can see is that it's obviously started to take on that color.
Yeah, we really. Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, we really notice so the barrel sort of does 3 things to the whiskey, but we really notice, I don't know, we've got bigger barrels as well aging, but we kind of notice with the 50-litre barrels that the color kind of comes probably first, nearly sometimes. So if it's a really hot summer, they've been in a barrel, just say we've put them in and it's like October, and then they go into a really hot summer, the color just comes out so much quicker than, just say if we put them in just after summer, then the color will take sort of 6 or more months to sort of come through. So it's just interesting how much the weather has its impact on the barrels in Australia, hence why we're allowed to call it whiskey with it only being 2 years in a barrel, where most of the rest of the world, whiskey has to be in a barrel for 3 years before they're allowed to call it. But yeah, you can just really see how the Australian climate up and down can just really have an impact on how the wood works. So
yeah, if you're talking about temperature fluctuations, from extreme to extreme of 20 plus degrees in terms of daily temperatures nightly, but even in the more stable sort of spring and autumn months, you're still getting quite significantly daily variations compared to, say, Scotland, where it's probably much less of a differential both day to day and across the years. So it's interesting how much that really impacts things like that age statement to be able to qualify. Do you find that has a difference also with that expansion and contraction and all that sort of stuff with angel share and spirit evaporation and loss?
Yeah, so we lose a lot. Considering Kinglake, we're in the mountains and we're sort of, always 3-4 degrees colder than Melbourne. We thought our angel share, so when we talk to people, they said angel share will be about 8 to 12% per year you lose, not just overall per year. So we figured Kinglake being colder would be about 9, but we're at 11, sort of 11 and a half, which was not always that good. But I think it's mainly because we're using the 50-litre barrel. So the good part about the 50-litre barrels, more of the whiskey touches the surface of the barrel, so therefore it's more likely to age quicker. But also that means more of that surface area means we're losing more to the angel share. So hopefully as we progress onto bigger barrels, that angel share percentage will decrease a bit. So yeah, so it's quite expensive to cut barrels down to smaller sizes. It probably costs us about 10 times as much more to cut a 200-litre bourbon barrel down to a 50, and then you only get obviously less than, then you lose your angel share for how many years it's been in. So this one we're having is nearly getting to 3 years, so we've lost sort of 11.5% angel share every year, plus you're only getting like less than 50 litres compared to if you had it in a 200. So it is a sort of an expensive process to do, to cut the barrels down. But
Gerald's just asked, Japanese whiskey has a strange aging formula. Do you know how we compare to that?
Oh, no, I don't. Do you?
No, I've got no clue on the Japanese aging formula at all. Gerald, have you got any more information on that? You could write it down and let us know. in
Oh,
terms of everyone else having a smell and taste of the work in progress, is there anything that anyone has to comment, whether it be a particular thing that you're getting either from the first sample that we had that you're now starting to recognize, or obviously in a difference from the new make to this, that you're what has changed for you? As we're moving on, we're about to go to the full noise. Not to rush you, but that will be the next one, which is Chantal, correct me if I'm wrong, that's basically the cast strength before it gets turned into the O'Grady strength.
Yeah, exactly. So this is our full noise. So we only, at the moment, we really just have one product that we're trying to build our brand on. We've been selling for about 1.5 years, and we just sort of feel like if you release too many products or too many lines really at one time, we just find it confusing to customers. I know what I'm like. If I see too many of one company, I'm like, I don't know what to go, which one do I get? So we really love our ex-bourbon, from our ex-bourbon whiskey. So yeah, we're focused on trying to do a consistent line of that, build our brand up, and then release sort of the next line. So we've got some fortified coming up. But yeah, so every now and then, if you're on our mailing list, we do small cast releases of some fun barrels, because it's obviously the fun part, but we do a cast strength release every now and then, so once or twice a year. So it's the black label called Full Noise. But yeah, so if you're keen to sort of keep on that, we also do, just to go on a bit of a tangent, yeah, we've done sort of a red gum, we've done a rum cast, so we sort of do fun stuff, but we don't tend to release that to the public, just because, yeah, we want to sort of build ourselves on that one product at the moment. So
yeah, no, it's a good product to build on. So as these other things come and go, any of you who aren't, yeah, you definitely get on that that mailing list and stay in touch, so that you don't miss out on a great opportunity when they may present themselves. Because having been and tried some of them at the distillery, it was there wasn't one that wasn't good, I tell you that. So yeah, strike while the iron is hot on that respect. Having said that, we will move on to the one that Chantal just showed us, the Full Noise. So if you're operating on a one glass changeover, and we'll get that happening, which is but yeah, essentially the cast strength version of the O'Grady stand that we started with. And it'd be interesting, again, to let us know if you've got any particular feelings or thoughts on how this compares with that. What are you getting from that extra ABV? What are you what are you missing that wasn't there? Let us know.
I go to I always preferred the cast strength, then cutting it back, but then you go back and forwards, and then Sam's like, no, I like the cast strength, and then I'm like, no, I think I prefer the 46%. So yeah, it's always a
some people like, we do a lot of obviously tasting events and all that sort of stuff, and there's people who are just like, yeah, where's the cast strength, let me add it type thing. And there's other people who are really happy to not have that heat, that strength, and just be content with it at a 43, 46 sort of price range, so to speak. But I think it's different for everybody, and a lot of people with cast strengths, you get a feeling like you get a bit more bang for your buck type thing, in terms of per dram, you're getting that little bit of extra kick. And I'm definitely that way. I like cast strength. So just while everyone's getting that and having a nose and having a taste, I just mentioned, Chantal, that I was at the distillery with Craig and the others from the Whisky Company earlier in the year. For anyone who is in Melbourne or Victoria or anywhere really, if you're down this way, what do they have to do to be able to share that experience and come and see your lovely distillery there?
Yeah, so we don't open up all the time, just because we came from hospitality, and yeah, we're really sort of focusing on making whiskey and getting it out there as much as we can. So but we do obviously want to show people how special it is where we make it. I think we sort of forget how good the provenance that we have and where it's getting made, because we take it for granted because we're there sort of every day. But yeah, so just go online. So we do tours. You just book, they're free, we don't charge. You come up, have a couple tastings, we'll run you through everything. You can have a look where we make it. and yeah, and then finish off. So yeah, we always have like a little cozy bar, so if you do book one and it's cold, don't worry, we do have heaters around, but hopefully it's a nice sunny day and we can sit outside. But yeah, so we do sort of 2 tours per weekend, maybe once or twice a month, so not too often, but yeah, so if you're keen, then definitely come up. It's always nice to meet people that are really interested.
And what's the website they should go to for that?
Oh yeah, so kinglake.distillery.com.au.
There you go, kinglake.distillery.com.au. Highly recommend it. And Kinglake's a beautiful little town as well, that you can build a day out of and around that. Behind me on this virtual background is actually taken when we were there. You can see it was a beautiful sunny day, not the cold crap that we're dealing with at the moment. But no, it was honestly a great tour and a beautiful afternoon spent not too far out of Melbourne. So especially for all you Melburnians, yeah, book it in, and maybe in the warm months go up there and have a visit Chantal and Sam and see what it's all about. All right, so having said that, we're on to the full noise. So is anyone got this? The whiskey will keep us warm. Indeed it will, Gerald. So what are people thinking about full noise? Any thoughts, any comparisons? So this is 61% and obviously at bottling age. So
yeah,
you can feel that a little extra really affected on the tongue and the sort of mouthfeel, but it still does have that. It also for me feels maybe a little more oily in the mouthfeel, a little more legs on the glass, that sort of thing, but still rich with that sort of maybe a heavier sort of toffee, vanilla toffee sort of than the first one. I haven't got any of the first one left because I've got a pour of the same glass. You think I'd have more than one glass, but it's no, it's delicious. Joshua is saying full noise seems much more refined than the previous two. So that's had an extra year on the work in progress, which was the last one we tasted. Agree, Josh, you can taste it heading into a direction through the different stages. You certainly can. And I think that's why this tasting has been different to the normal ones that some of you may have done with us, or in other places where you may taste 6 different bottlings from the same distillery. You might go through, a 10 and a 12 and a cast finish and a couple of cast strengths and maybe their peated option or something like that. Whereas this has been a bit more of a journey, to use that word, to go through, from point A right through to point B and visit along the way. It's been really interesting, and I think I will say that I'll put my hand up for the cast strength as a preference. Although I would be happy with either. Yeah, it is interesting seeing all those different stages.
I think people don't they just don't get sort of, when you hear distillers are going around tasting all the time. Now you can sort of understand when we are tasting, is it ready or not? You sort of, I guess the first thing you sort of think, is it hot? That's sort of the obvious one we always go for. If something's sort of getting close to 2 years, sort of have a taste. Can we taste the new make? And if you ever doubt it, just take a bit of new make with us and you can always smell it and taste it and compare the two. So yeah, and then as time goes on, you sort of get more confident in yourself and be like, no, this is not ready. Yep, this is ready. So yeah, just something that happens over time.
Yeah, absolutely. If hopefully you all have got some of the O'Grady stand left or have saved some in the bag to pour out. So this might be a good point where, while you've still got the cast strength, the full noise going, to just go back to that first sample, the regular O'Grady stand, excuse me. Maybe just nose them together, taste them together, see what you think, and just have a think about all the things we've talked about and tasted across to get to this point. And more so, have you got a different experience from the very first sample we had at the start before we tried everything else? And yeah, just let us know what you think.
Sorry, I guess sorry, as I'll just talk as you're probably comparing the two. It always feels a bit weaker when you go from a cask strength back down to sort of a 46. But I guess the other thing, we keep the recipe the same. So Stuart will be always doing the same recipe for us. We like the idea of having the same recipe, and it'll be the barrel that gives the change, just because we like to think Kinglake's had too many whiskies already. Kinglake's got its own unique taste. So we like to sort of think in, a blind lineup, doesn't matter if it's a ex-bourbon, port, sherry, or any of the other ones, you'll be able to have that. We've got that distinctive taste. So yeah, so the recipe will always be the same, and it'll just be the barrel that will alter it.
Sure. And I've just seen that you said that Leon was asking about, are you looking to take anything to those age statements such as 8 to 12 years? You said, yes, you've got some 200-litre barrels that are in for the journey. So yeah. Are they bourbon, ex-bourbon?
Yes, so we've got ex-bourbon, and we've got some 200 port, and we've got 200 ports, but yeah, I think they're going to taste too good, but I don't think they're really going to make it to 8 to 12 years. They're actually, some of them, yeah, they're tasting really good already. So
how do you deal with that decision and that temptation to just commit to a age statement and then just know it's there and just say, no, that's still there for 7 years more, whatever. Is it something that you make a decision once and you both sign off on it and then you just put it to bed, or is it something you come back to and say, should we try it, all that sort of thing, or open up that conversation again? Or
no, you just got to be like, we just have a couple 200s, just put them to the side, because you get tempted, you can kind of use them for special releases. But we're like, no, just put the 200s, put them in the back. We've got a brandy, which is our biggest barrel, that's 330 litres.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, we put that down probably about a year, maybe coming up to 2 years, and it just still tastes like new make. So that will be probably 8-12 years at least before anything happens in that brandy one.
Sure.
Yep.
Just tasting the 46% again. I am getting little bits more like when Stu was saying about like a biscuity, almost like a baked cakey sort of quality to it that I wasn't getting again from the cask strength. That little bit lighter, a bit more open. It is delicious. What are the options for fill your own barrel, Gerald?
Yeah, so we're pretty flexible with that. We can get the barrel for you. We can do ex-bourbon, we can get port, whatever we can get our hands on. Ex-bourbon also we can always get, but or you can buy a barrel and we can fill it with our new make. We're pretty open to whatever. Which is, we're actually getting a lot of people that have purchased a barrel somewhere else. So.
Are they those barrels? Are they aging with the rest of them on site with you guys?
Yeah, most of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Chantal, what else have you guys got either in the works coming up that we haven't spoken about? Any, like you said before, in terms of the fun casts and things like that, any particular interesting things that that these guys might be able to hear about later in the year or next year or something like that?
Yeah, so we've got another red gum that's coming along really well. So the red gum barrel we had made, we're lucky we've got a cooper. He's not really interested in coopering too much. He's done his time, but we're quite lucky. He's doesn't live too far away from us, and he's happy to kind of do it for us. So he makes our red gum barrels. So we've got a couple of those, and we gave them to Moondog Brewery back in the day. They put a whole lot of stouts in it and some barley wine, and then we put our bourbon in, our whiskey. But we like to think, or we do anything that's kind of like not oak. We like to have the whiskey of age 2 years in oak first before we'll use a different barrel like red gum, just because we feel like that makes it feel like more of a whiskey. So yeah, so the red gum was really good the first time. So we've got a second fill of that. So that will come up in the next sort of 8 months or so. And then we're actually, our fortified, we were going to hold off for another year to sort of just really work on the ex-bourbon. But yeah, our 100s and some of the 200s are just tasting really good at the moment. So I think before the end of the year, we'll probably do another line. It will be the port or sherry, but we'll make it like a fortified line. So it'll be one or the other. But Yeah, definitely.
Will that be for like a limited, like single cask type thing, or will that be to add into the actual core range, so to speak?
Yeah, so we're still in discussion, so open to thoughts, but we'll probably do maybe just a limited release first, get some feedback, see what people think, and then we've got enough to probably do a full line of that and try and keep it as consistent.
That's great. We also, as normal for these here via the Whisky Company, for any of you who maybe haven't had this before tonight, hope that you've enjoyed the spirit as well as the tasting. If there's anyone out there who would like to purchase a bottle of the O'Grady Stand, we have a discount code just for you guys here tonight that'll be valid for until Sunday, which is literally Kinglake 10, not the TN, Kinglake 10. So you can purchase that via thewhiskeycompany.com.au, get a 10% off, and we'll send it out to you post taste. In also to that, if you go to was Kinglake Distillery, kinglake.distillery.com.au.
Yep.
And have a look at everything that they're doing there. That's where they would sign up to the mailing list as well.
Correct. Yep.
Yes, and so therefore, things that Chantal was just saying in terms of that fortified and other stuff that may be coming through, you don't want to miss out on an opportunity for this. But I hope that in general that this has been, as much as it's been a tasty journey, it's been educational to sort of see where things are coming from, and Stu as well, for such great info, not only on your history and how Voyager got going, but also in the process of the malting and the different varieties. I know that I think I might leave one of these bags on my desk and just nibble at that for the rest of the week. But at this point in time, are there any questions at all that anyone has for Chantal, for Stu, in general? Feel free to either type in chat or come off mute if you'd like to ask a question before we wrap everything up. Joshua's just said this is very off topic, but do any of you have any experience in Armagnac, or would it compare to whiskey? Feel free to disregard if too off topic.
No, I don't actually.
No. I can't help you there. I'm sorry, Josh. But it's an interesting question.
I think it must be a topic because I've had one of the bottle shops talk about that with me as well. So it's weird.
Maybe worthy of investigating.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who'd like to ask anything?
I think I saw a photo of that Cooper on Facebook. He looked like quite a character.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah, George Cooper. Yeah, and funny enough, he's kind of like a friend of a friend, family friend of a friend. And then he kind of came up once and you're like, oh yeah, my son's next door. He lives next door to the distillery. You're just like, oh, it's crazy how like small. So yeah, no, it's cool. He's a really cool guy. Really cool guy.
Is his name George Cooper as
yeah,
well?
Yeah, he's third generation. He's been in his family. I think
that's
he's
awesome.
I think he's teaching his granddaughter to try and keep it generational.
Keep the generational thing going. That's awesome.
Isn't it? Yeah,
I love that sort of thing.
Is that you in the ghillie suit on the website?
Yeah, no, that's my cousin. He did the designing. We haven't quite decided where we're going to go with that, but yeah, we'll keep that open.
In the dam, probably.
That's I forgot about that. It's a very distinctive photo at the front, isn't it?
Yeah, well, my cousin, he kind of wants this, he's sort of like a designer in America, but he goes to Japan a lot, and he kind of wanted to use it as a figure where he'd walk in and he'd be like, oh, hi, Bill, and like the figures there in the distillery. So, but we haven't open to suggestions how we're going to work with it yet.
Yeah, no, for sure. Stu, is there anything that you'd like to either add or say before we wrap things up from your point of view?
Not really, no. I mean, that was a very brief introduction to the world of malting. So if anyone's got more questions, fire away now. Otherwise, I'm always available through Voyager Craft Malt or at the Witten Malt House. So if you're interested in tasting, seeing where the grains are grown, that Chantal and Sam use, and tasting some of their whiskies, but also some of our other clients' whiskies, and staying on site in the middle of these paddocks, then yeah, don't hesitate to come and visit us in Whitton, New South Wales. So yeah, we're basically, you can sit at the whiskey bar and look straight across into the malt production floor and see grains being malted. To your right, and then to your left, you can look out amongst the fields of barley that we've got grown. So it's kind of a fairly unique experience that I don't think you can kind of get anywhere else in the world. Yeah, it's here in regional New South Wales. So by all means, encourage everyone to come and visit. And if you let them know at the bar that that you heard me gibber on late one evening at a Kinglake tasting as part of the whiskey list, then I'll come and show you around and give a bit of a private tour.
Can I make a 3-month booking?
If you bring some of that cake with you, yeah, we might be able to.
As my grandma, I never got any of that cake. That was the first I heard of it.
I'll have to dig her up. Or at least the recipe.
Yeah, I'd definitely go. Stew's amazing. So
I've done a few of these events, and having the malt to taste alongside it was, I've never done that before, and that was really, you could really taste the difference between them. So great idea and great stuff, Stu.
Yeah,
I agree. We know nothing about malting, and you've been very helpful. And one day we'll think of a question.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess for us, we've got the grain for seven days is the malting process. By the time we germinate, wet it, germinate it, kiln it, package it, we've got it for 7 days. So the real magic happens at either side of us in the distillery, in terms of what Sam and Chantal are doing, but also in the paddock. I said that I think the risk and sacrifices that a lot of our growers make in farming, preparing fields, but farming in an ever-changing climate and dealing with climate change and floods and droughts and those kind of things, mice, grasshoppers, it's I guess we kind of see ourselves a little bit as matchmakers, essentially, by teaming up farmers with people like Chantal and Sam. The recognition, the satisfaction that farmers can get by knowing where their product ends up and seeing what guys like Chantal and Sam have created from it is something that unfortunately many farmers in Australia just don't get. So I think the more that we can champion farmers and agriculture in Australia, because we do, we grow some of the best barley in the world by a country mile. But yet it's something that very few people kind of realize goes into alcoholic drinks that they drink on a daily basis. So it's great to be here talking to you all tonight, but it's also great to the work that a lot of the distillers and craft brewers have got or making to really champion the agriculture that goes behind the products that they're putting in front of you all.
We thank you on behalf of all consumers.
Yeah. I mean, we get really excited about using Voyager Malt. It's just so nice I come from a farming background as well, so for us it's nice for people with this talk, like when I go and meet people and talk to shops and bars, I spend a whole lot of my time talking about Voyager Malt and the farmers, and for me it's the whole process, not just what we do, it's everyone. So
sorry, that Voyager Malt, which I haven't tasted yet, is it just Atlas and chocolate, or is it something else?
Vienna.
I think that's the blend that goes into the to Kinglake whiskey. So that would contain a percentage of all the ones that we tasted. So the Atlas, the Vienna, the chocolate, and the Peated Malt. And I reckon that if you spent tomorrow separating them all out, Gerald, you'd be able to come up with the exact percentages that you're using.
Wrong. I'm going to start my own distillery.
Yeah, well, no, we tell everyone. We're pretty open about it. We feel like, it's Kinglake that makes the difference in our whiskies. So, it's 3.5% chocolate if you want to know, 18% peat, and the rest, the other.
As a motorcycle rider, Kinglake has a lot of fascinating roads and a distillery.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, get down to Kinglake Distillery, and if you're in New South Wales, get across to Voyager and go visit Stu as well. And I'd like to thank both again, Chantal and Stu, for joining us and being so insightful and telling us everything that we've heard tonight, and especially such a unique tasting event. I mean, we do these things all the time, and I agree 100% with what Leon said. We've never had, or have I ever participated in one where we've had the malt and the grain and the different stages. So I hope that we've all experienced something a little different from all of that. And especially for all you guys who are on here live with us tonight, thank you for participating, for your feedback in chat and now in live. If you're watching this on YouTube at a later date, thank you for participating. I understand not everyone can be involved on the night. We hope that you've enjoyed it just the same. With that, I'll wind this one up and say that I hope you all enjoy Kinglake Whisky in the future, and have a great rest of your weekend, wherever it is when you're watching this. Stay safe, and we'll catch you at the next one. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah.